In about 2009, video GGR. Daro ASP.NET better the video to Kuba. Budaya Yawan, Akuma, Lila Manu, the Budaya Yawan chain. Chinesia Koma video that.
So what exactly is ASP.NET Core? It's a complete rewrite of the platform. It is meant to be cross-platform and open source. It has combined the platforms of MVC and Web API to a single code base, and it has created the new framework where everything is a dependency. It's jettisoned some of the weight and the age of the code base, allowing them to get to a very small memory footprint. It's allowing multiple deployment support, which means it can be deployed in the cloud and IaaS, through self-hosting, and other scenarios.
The Oma Yamaluri, San Andrew with our to build our Pada Piana Mobile, a chilly bed, a chilly bed, Tobio, do that Hava. I hear John had to show you, the Janamale, the solution, Namidu Yavare. I don't set on video.
Let's try to look at the big picture. Right now, inside of the world of the web, we really have two scenarios. We have Windows, and then we have Unix, Linux, OS X as platforms. And very much ASP.NET has been a Windows-only solution. So when we look at ASP.NET Core, including some of the subsystems shown here, it really crosses both the Unix and Linux-based operating systems as well as continuing to support Windows. So ASP.NET Core can sit on top of .NET 4.6, which represents the existing .NET CLR. But it also can sit on top of .NET Core, which is a new cross-platform version of the CLR, often called Core CLR versus the .NET CLR. This means that ASP.NET Core can still sit on top of IIS as a native loader, or can sit on top of Windows using self-hosted execution, and then over on Unix, Linux, and OS X, it can also be executed via self-hosted execution. So this enables ASP.NET to be used in more scenarios than it ever could. It can be developed off of Windows if you wanted to. It can be deployed off of Windows if you wanted to. And this enables a lot of scenarios that were just too difficult to get into prior to ASP.NET Core.
And the framework code ASP.NET code ma pare kauni bo ai ba ma to di ASP.NET code the frame chara di CLI na frame chara common language run dai ne no you know the 4.6 4.6 အခု 4.6 မကပါဘူးyou know သူပြခဲ့တော့ဒီ video ကြပြခဲ့တော့သူ 4.6 နဲ့ပြထားတာပေါ့နော်ဆိုတော့ကျွန်တော် 4.6 နောက်ပိုင်းမှာ version တွေရှိပါသေးတယ်ပြောချင်တာက .NET framework ကျွန်တော်တို့နေရင်းနှီးပြီးသားအရာပေါ့နော်Windows 7တော့ 3.5 တော့ပြီးလို့ရှိရင် 3.5 တပြည့်ပြည့် 4.0 4. အဲ့ဒါနေပြီးတော့ 4. အခုဒီ 6 7 8ဒီလိုတွေဖြစ်လာတာပေါ့နော်အခုကျွန်တော်ထင်တယ် .NET framework 4.9 တော့ပါလားမသိဘူးအဲ့လောက်တော့ရှိနေတော့ပြီပေါ့နော်ဆိုတော့ဒါ .NET CLR ဘက်က .NET CLR လို့ခေါ်တယ်.NETကိုဘက်ကကျတော့ကို CLR လို့ခေါ်တယ်ဒီနှစ်ခုလုံးရှိတယ်ပေါ့နော်ဒီနှစ်ခုလုံးပါတယ်ဆိုတော့ ASP.NET ကိုမှာဒီနှစ်ခုစလုံးပါတယ်ဒီ common language ဆိုတဲ့နှစ်ခုစလုံးရှိတယ်ပေါ့နော်ပြီးတော့ဒီ execution လုပ်တော့မယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင် execution ဆိုဒီကြတော့ဒီမှာဒီကိုယ့် website ရေးဆို web application run မယ်ပေါ့ run မယ်ဆိုရင်Windows ဘက်မှာ IIS ရှိပြီးသား IIS ရှိရဲဆိုတော့အဲ့ဒါလည်းအဆင်ပြေတယ်ပြီးတော့ရှင် .NET CLI သုံးမယ်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လည်းသုံးလို့ရတယ် Windows ဘက်မှာဒါပေမဲ့ Unix တို့ Linux တို့ဒီ OS X တို့ဘက်မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့သူက .NET CLI ပဲရအောင်ပဲဒါတော့ဆိုလိုတာเนาะ
Now, in this course, we're going to focus on using a Windows IDE, chiefly Visual Studio 2017, to build the applications, but I will show you in the last module how to deploy it on non-Microsoft operating systems. So we look at the frameworks that it can run on top of. What are our choices? We can certainly sit on top of the desktop.NET that is in version 4 now. And this is the .NET you've always used. This is installed at primarily a machine level, it's updated at a machine level, and is limited to Windows only. .NET Core, on the other hand, is cross-platform and is a subset of the full .NET framework. There's some parts of the framework that don't make sense right now for cross-platform use. But this version of the .NET Core has support for Linux, Mac, and Windows. ASP.NET Core is also fully composed. What that means is that everything above the CLR and some of the loading mechanism is just a package. It's just a package that we get from NuGet. The .NET Core framework simply has a way to load the CLR and start execution of code, and that's about it. Everything else we're going to be using, MVC, logging, identity, etc., they're all just NuGet packages. What that means is that
the MVC the MVC the login the identity totally packages you package the layer out of machine package identity the user number the user create that's I know sorry.
Everything is optional. If you want to replace the built-in identity stuff with
everything is dependency. The package solution, everything is optional.
With your own identity, you don't have to include both of them and turn one off. If you don't want to use MVC and you want to do something raw or go to a third party or another open source solution, feel free to do that. That means you can still sit on top of .NET Core whether you're using MVC or not. Microsoft has also made the decision to embrace the open web development. What that means is that if you're using an open source tool, you should be able to continue using that open source tool. Using NPM for handling tool support like Gulp and Grunt, you can continue doing that with ASP.NET Core. If you're using Bower or NPM for client-side library management, you can continue to do that.
NPM you get package manager of your tutorial general don't let the master, don't let the master, don't win it, die. At the other power NPM Suraga, Kumishiro, support Mishiro, Eraga, Kupapito ideas, Libman Chitabi, LIB, library manager, Libman, LIB, Libman, Libman Suraga, General D. Donat him, tell you about it. ASB Donat you web or web application, don't we are the ASB don't go application only at MVC only no I got limb to yellow to build out the ball and PM no hold over no early to and then tape the other grand gap to the bit outside.
If you're going to use Grunt and Gulp for automating builds, go for it. If you're already using NuGet for packages, you're going to continue using packages in much the same way. None of this is required that you use. You can really take and embrace the open source solution that makes the most sense for your organization. When we're thinking about deployment options on ASP.NET Core, we can see that we have different options for different operating systems. Now on Windows, we can deploy it directly on hardware we own, in a VM, in a container, or in a variety of cloud hostings. On Mac, we're pretty much limited to directly on hardware, though we can do some container support while in development. And on Linux, we also have the full breadth of support directly on hardware, in virtual machines, in containers, and of course cloud hosting on Linux. The only
however the virtual machine deployment of the website the online program publish load publish load containers or Docker logo container support cloud hosting cloud hosting the AWS to something I tell you method
Caveat here is that each version of ASP.NET Core has a fixed number of distributions that it's going to support. I think it's about 10 distributions as of ASP.NET Core 2. Some of those Linux distributions are now preloading ASP.NET Core as part of their distributions. So you can see a partnership between Microsoft and the Linux world being deeper than it has been in any point in my career.
So ပြီးတော့ပြီဗီဒီယိုကတော့ဒါပါပဲဟိုဒါ ASP.NET ကိုဆိုတာဘာလည်းမသိသေးတဲ့လူတွေအတွက်ဒါဟိုအကြံဉာဏ်လေးသိနာလဲတော့အောင်ဒီဗီဒီယိုလေးကို reaction လုပ်ပေးလိုက်ရတာပါဒီတဲ့ကျွန်တော်တို့ဟိုဘယ်လိုခေါ်မလဲ different တွေသိကျင်သေးလားဟိုမှာ ASP.NET နဲ့ ASP.NET ကိုနဲ့ဘာကွာလဲအဲ့ different တွေသိကျင်တဲ့ solution နဲ့ comment မှာဖြစ်ဖြစ်ပေးခဲ့လို့ရပါတယ်အားလုံးကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်